How's it going, everyone? It is Wednesday, July 24th, 2024. Let's get into the picks from yesterday's video. We had a Tesla time spread, and I took a loss on this time spread in the opening candle here. We gapped down, and if you look at these pink lines on Tesla, the first set of pink lines was about the average move that it usually makes on earnings. The second set of pink lines is the expected move priced in by market makers. So I knew that when we opened somewhere right here, 225, I wanted to see the first candle. If we would get a green candle, that would get us back closer to that average move, and I could potentially scratch out of the trade. Or if we get a red candle, and I'd have to take the loss. So I got in at about 215. When it opened, the stock was around about 165. So it could have taken maybe a 25% profit, and if I held on and I saw the green candle, there was a chance, 25% loss, my bad. But if I saw a green candle, we moved a little bit back into the range, I knew I had a chance to potentially scratch the trade or even get out for a good win. But instead, we got a red candle, so ended up taking about a 55% loss on the trade, got out for 96 cents. So doing the math in my head, it's about a 55% loss. And you can see how the stock after that had continued downward. I knew that once it kind of moved down, there's probably a good chance that we would not really see any sort of major bounce immediately. And I just didn't want to be in that position. I figured I'd rather take the half loss rather than the max loss on this stock. So that was Tesla. Let's take a look at the other positions that we have right now. And we have first, let's look at Snow. So Snow, after pulling back to the 8 EMA, it is starting to make its move today, really starting to accelerate here. There is some volume coming in. So I like what I'm seeing in Snow. Potentially may add to this trade today, depending on what I get from the market and what I see from the stock. So I'm going to set an LRSI alert here, as well as an HA reversal alert here on the stock. Second one over here, JMIA. So watching this stock carefully, we got in at around 3. I got a little bit earlier, 366, but we took the trade somewhere here around 1430. This stock is pulling back. Looks like it is testing the opening of these candles and potentially the lows over here. So I'm still holding on to it. I think the D1 is still a very fantastic D1, and I'm going to lean into this chart over here. But we're taking some heat for two reasons. The first is that there's some selling pressure at this high right here. The second reason is that we have some market weakness. Now you can see that this stock looks like it may be putting in a double bottom at this level right here. And ideally for the rest of the day, I'd want to see this stock hold the gains if the market is going down. That tells me that there are buyers in this stock. So I'm going to set an alert here. I'm going to set an alert here. And we have this downward sloping trend line. So when that's breached, I know that I could potentially add to the trade and then ride it up higher on the next leg. So taking some heat on this trade right now. But that is okay, given the fact that we have a strong D1 to lean on, and we know that the market is doing pretty weak. So speaking of the market, let's take a look at what is going on here. First on the D1 chart, I mentioned that we have this upward sloping channel here that has been breached to the downside. Mega cap tech earnings came in and they were a little bit weak. We already saw Tesla here looking fairly weak. And then we also have Google, which also had a decent drop, not as big as Tesla, but it did have a drop. Right now, it's between its A, VWAP, E, and this upward sloping trend line over here. So that has been weighing down on the market and on mega cap tech in general. If you look at the mega cap tech stocks, you can see that pretty much all of them are weaker than SPY today. So they're really leading the charge down and responsible for a lot of the market selling that we're seeing. If we're looking at some of the market strength today, you can see that a lot of the tech ETFs are weaker than SPY. RSP and IWM are doing okay, but they're still down. And confirming that with our sector analysis, there is a good amount of bearish breadth in the market, but these three sectors are really pulling it down. Tech in general, Comms has Google, consumer cyclical has Tesla. So that's why those are doing much weaker than tech today. So all that tells us that the tech is leading the move down, specifically mega cap tech, and that the market components are generally pretty bearish. A few pockets of strength. A lot of these basic mats, strong stocks here are going to be your gold stocks. If you look at heavy buy here, stuff like NEM, NEE, these stocks are doing really well. There is some money flowing into gold. Looks like ENPF is having itself a good day and has been grinding higher. So this may be one to watch for the future. All right, so longer term market bias. On a fundamental note, I'm still fairly bullish, right? We want to see what, for two reasons. One, this is the first reaction to two mega cap tech earnings, and we want to see how the rest pan out before we really make any sort of decision. So that's the first reason. Second reason is that in terms of, the big macro fundamental drivers, right? Like the economic strength, interest rates coming down, AI as a big valuation driver. All those things are still in play. So all this tells you that this is just a normal pullback in a bull market, and frankly, one that was long overdue, one that we were expecting since June. The interesting thing, and here's a mental trick that I've been thinking about, over here, if you're like, oh man, I missed this leg of the rally, well, now look at what you have, right? If you never traded that, you're at the same price over here waiting for that pullback. So that's a little trick to say, hey, if you were ready for the move up here and now the market has pulled back to this move, your patience was rewarded because your price ended up not really changing too much over there. Now, technically here, we've broken through this upward sloping trend line over here. We can even draw a longer term one coming into play that also intersects a little bit around here. So that might provide a little bit of support. But what I'm really watching for here is two things. First, this horizontal support right around 543 to 542.50, as well as the 50 SMA coming into play around 541.80. So there's a couple of support levels right over here that we might see the market stall or even stage a bounce. So that's what I'm seeing long-term technically. Still mildly bullish again, right? Light volume rally. We're seeing some pullback on heavy volume. Let's see how deep this pullback goes, and let's see how strong the bounce up is before we change our longer-term market bias. On an earlier video, I did say that we might see some seasonal weakness in August and September. Potentially even some quietness in October, as the market may have some nervous jitters and might wait to see the results of the elections that will come out in November. So I think we may see a holiday rally in November and December, but the outlook August, September, October is, I'd say right now, fairly neutral generally. And that's a loosely held opinion, subject to change based on the price action. That is just the inclination based on seasonality and some major news events. Shorter term time frame, the downtrend is continuing, and I thought this was the key here. We get this move down, we have a gap up, we hold the gap, which I thought was bullish, but we aren't able to really advance past it. We pitter patter for 2 days waiting for these tech releases. Then we get a gap down on heavy volume and then some follow through on that. Okay, so let's zoom into what the heck is happening today. Well, big gap down, 1% gap down. And the reason that this gap down is going to be sticky is because this is a pretty big news that came out, right? This is mega cap tech weighing down on the market. So as long as they are weak, the market is going to be following or seeing some follow through on that. So I think there was an early window to get in for shorts, probably in the first 20 to 25 minutes, which is not really advised unless you really know what you're doing. So I think, I saw maybe 1 or 2 potential trades, but you have to act quick. You have to be ready before this move. You really have to know how to trade this well and what are your warning signs. So, if you didn't take this move, that's fine. We have a gap and go bear trend day. Here's most of the move here. And then we're just kind of pitter-pattering over here, not really doing too much. We got some tiny body candles. The volume has been excellent all day, and this is some very steady selling. So We're seeing some mixed candles here, some tiny body candles again, hugging that 8 EMA, just poking through the low of the day steadily, 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 steadily. Here may be the first sign of a little bit of a bounce, and that is what we want. We want to see a bounce. So, a couple of scenarios for today that didn't end up panning out. The first and least likely scenario was a sharp reversal here on this bullish cross, which didn't end up happening. The second scenario was maybe a weaker bounce, which was more likely to happen and with the best scenario for us, because then we can find relatively weak stocks. The third scenario that played out was we're at the end of the move here, and this is just a weak drift lower. So you don't want to be shorting in here. Why don't you be shorting in here? Because this is the move, right? The move is from a high of 533.91 all the way here to a low of 544.19. So that is a $9 move in the stock, and half of that move has been realized as an overnight gap down. So you have to already get in early because you're getting in the direction of the gap for this trend, but you want to join in the middle of the move, which is earlier in the trading session, which is just not as favorable. So over here, we know we're at the end of the move, and you just have to be extra patient. Wait for the bounce to come up, find your relatively weak stocks, and then you want to get in on some trades. So speaking of some relatively weak stocks, I have 2 picks for today. The first pick I'm going to give is ALAB. I really like this D1 chart. It has been in a steady drift lower. Sellers are very clearly in control. Beautiful downward sloping trend line. And then here is what looks like to be the other downward sloping trend line coming into play, potentially breached to the downside. So here's what I like about the stock, and here's how I found it. So I modified Spectre's bear grinder search, and usually on these days, what's very interesting is that because of the gap down, a lot of stocks are going to show relative strength in the first opening bars. And relative strength and relative weakness won't really give you the true story on an intraday basis. So what I've done is I had relative strength on the market on an M15 time frame, but a bearish trade signal. And this would give me stocks that were grinding lower. And I found a lot of great candidates in these stocks. ALAB was one of them. You can see how it had a flat open and it is moving down lower. That tells us that we're closer to the move not being exhausted, and that's what we want. So we want to see these flat opens here that are grinding lower, and then they ignore the market on a bounce. That gives us the clue to enter in on these stocks. So here's another one I found, CEG. The stock, again, not a huge, big drop, but it has been grinding lower the whole day. MBOY, I see it has a big drop, and now it's just kind of compressing. If it breaks to that low of the day, it could be a pretty nice short later in the day. So we're looking for some late day shorts here. We're looking for a bit of a bounce, and we want stocks that have very strong price action that are just grinding lower and lower and lower. Lulu is another nice one as well. This stock pulled back to the 8 EMA, finding some support or finding some resistance. Now it is coming back lower. So have an HA reversal set on Lulu if that comes into play. But ALAB is going to be my pick of the day. Has a little bit of a green candle here. I'd want to wait for perhaps an LRSI pullback or and maybe an HA reversal to get in on this trade. I'm anticipating that we may see a bounce here in the market. We have a bearish cycle in a deep trough. We have a bullish engulfing candle right here. Some decent volume, a little bit of follow through. It's held. I want to see some sort of bounce which gives us some sort of range. The worst scenario is that we're in this sort of bearish meat grinder, and we don't really get anything going to the downside or the upside. It becomes very, very low probability, because buyers aren't really able to drive up price higher, but sellers are still fairly aggressive, and you just get in this kind of wide and really weak, drifty, bearish channel. So hopefully we get a little bit moved to VWAP. This is going to draw in some bottom fishers, some bullish specs, even a little bit of a hook above VWAP. That'll squeeze out some short sellers and attract some bullish specs, and then we'll get a door slam in the form of a bearish engulfing candle or a bearish hammer that would tell me that I would like to favor the short side. I'm also watching for the strength of this move here. If we see steady buying, steady green candles, I'm a little bit more wary of this bounce. If we have weak mixed overlapping candles, or perhaps like a single green solo, then that gets smacked down, that would have me much more bearish because it tells me that buyers aren't really able to stage any sort of meaningful or strong bounce in this next bullish cycle. So ALB is what I'm watching for. I want to see some relative weakness in the stock, and I want to get close to that 8 EMA on a pullback. So I'd love to see this stock stall out over here as the market bounces higher. And then when the market starts to hit some resistance and the stock starts to break down a little bit, that's when I would enter the trade. So ALAB, we're going to add that to our YouTube picks. The other trade I like here as a pre-earn option is actually VKTX as an earnings time spread. You can see that it has not exceeded earnings and it has a very high IV differential, decent option liquidity. Now, the thing that's has me a little bit on the fence about VKTX is that this expected move is about 3 times higher than the average move, which is very, very high. A lot of these moves typically end up being closer to 2 or even less than 2 if you look at something like QS or even AAL. So has me a little bit, uncertain, you would say, about those moves. But I looked up, there wasn't any major news on this stock that could happen. VKTX is also a biotech stock, so that might help in terms of that expected move range. So, with all that being said, I'm going to recommend this as a time spread for today. I think it's a good time spread, and we'll keep an eye out on how this does in tomorrow's video. So I'm going to add this to our YouTube picks as well. So we have a day trade short potential, we have 1 long, we have 1 short, and we have a earnings time spread. So those are our picks today. Let's see what the market does over here in this next leg up. And then let's find some nice trades. Thanks for watching, everyone, and we'll take a look at these trades in the next video.